Well, good afternoon. Today I want to look at in depth the passage that we've been studying with the Rashi the last few days. And I want to look at it beyond the Rashi, now with some of the Midrashim and the commentaries on the passage of what's become known as the curse of Ham, in English, the curse of Ham, from Genesis chapter 9. So let's just review the passage. And I'll read the psukim, and then after that, we'll look at some of the midrashim and some of the commentaries. So it says, chapter 9, verse 18, Vayihu b'nei Noach hayotzim min hateva, the sons of Noach who went out from the ark, Shem, Cham, v'Yafet. The sons of Noah who went out from the ark are called Shem, Cham, and Yafet, and Cham who avi Canaan. Ham is the father of Canaan. Now, this is, first of all, right away, we're wondering, why does it need to tell us this? How many times are we being told in this portion that the sons of Noach are Shem, Cham, and Yafet? It's the second verse of the portion. It says it again after this. It says when they go into the ark. Why do we need to keep being told that these are his sons? And so the Hasidic commentaries say that the names of these sons hint to three types of personalities. The Shem represents the service of God. Cham represents like the passion. And we'll see perhaps the unbridled passion, which can be very dangerous. And Yefet possibly refers to beauty and aesthetics. And so these are three aspects of personalities. And Cham is the father of Canaan. Why are we told that Cham is the father of Canaan? First of all, Cham has other children. And so Rashi tells us it's because we're going to need to know why Canaan is going to be cursed. And this is the passage that tells us that Canaan is cursed. Descendants of Canaan are cursed to be a slave. And so since it needs to introduce that to us, therefore it tells us that Cham is the father of Canaan. One of the big questions is, what did Canaan do? If Cham is the one who did something wrong in the story, why is Canaan cursed? And we're going to get to that. Canaan is the grandson of Noah. Cham is the son. So it says, Vayachal Noach ish adamah. So Noach began, and Rashi says it's a derogatory language, that Noah debased himself by planting a vineyard. He plants the vineyard, and he drinks from the wine. Vayesh min hayayin, he drinks from the wine. Vayishkar, and he became drunk. Vayitgal b'toch ha'olo, and he revealed himself. Now here is a little bit difficult because the text, even though it's enunciated as his tent, if you look at the actual words, it's ahala, as her tent. So that's why we have to read it as Rashi already tells us to this fact. Rashi tells us, but it's written as her tent. Why do we read it as his tent? Rashi says it's to hint to the fact that the 10 tribes, that it refers to the 10 tribes, and that they became exiled for the sin of wine. But this just highlights the fact that right away we should be wondering, why does it say her tent when it's referring to his tent? Some want to say that there's much deeper lesson here, and quite possibly there's a very provocative idea that has a totally different reading of this story, that says that the sin happened with Noah's wife. We can get to that if you remind me. I'll mention that at the end. But hold on. I see that there's a. So, Vayar Cham. It says that Cham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father. Ervas Aviv. We don't know exactly what he saw. We was pointed out in our Rashi study that it really doesn't mean the naked. The words Ervas Aviv throughout the Torah, like in Leviticus, refers to not the nakedness per se, but a inappropriate sexual relationship. And he told his two brothers outside. So Right away, Rashi cites the Midrash because we want to understand, what did Canaan do wrong? Canaan is the one who's going to end up getting cursed. Rashi right away highlights that Canaan was the one who told his father. That's how Ham saw it. How did Ham know? Because Canaan told his father. And so that's why he's the one who ended up getting punished. And then it says that Shem and Yafet took the garment and they put it on their shoulders and they went in backwards and they covered the nakedness of their father, and their faces were turned around and they did not see the nakedness of their father. Here too, we can just pause for a moment. See, if we have time, we'll get to the Hasidic explanation and the description about how the names relate to their spiritual identity. But Shem represents the purely divine, the relationship with God directly, whereas Yafet is the aesthetics. And what did they do? They came and they were placed a garment to cover up nakedness. So that seems to be what's going on. Vayiketz Noach miyeno. Noach wakes up from his wine. Vayeda et asher asalo b'Noach katan, and he knows what his younger son has done to him. Well, what did he do? According to the text, all he's done is look at his father naked. So how could Noach wake up and know that? That's why the text, the Gemara in Sanhedrin tells us, no, what does it mean? What does he know that he did to him? Rashi tells us either he castrated him, that presumably Ham castrated his father Noach, or else he committed a sexual act upon his father. So something was done to him. That's the two explanations from the Midrash. But the act that says that he did a sexual act on his father, that approach also agrees that he castrated him. Meaning to say the rabbinic interpretation is that what he did to his father was he castrated him. He didn't want him to have any more children, and he wanted to take over the family line. But Noach wakes up and he says, Vayomer. But first of all, it says he knows what his younger son has done to him. But Cham is not the Beno HaKatan. It's a difficulty. Why does it say the younger son? The Beno HaKatan. This is Cham, according to what we just said, he has three children, Shem, Cham, and Yafet. Cham is the middle son. It's a difficulty. Why does he call him the younger son, the Katan? So here too, Rashi is bothered, and Rashi tells us that the word Katan does not here mean the youngest son, because he's clearly not the youngest son. So Rashi says that it means the disgraced son. And Rashi gives us an example in Jeremiah that the word Katan can mean disgraced. So now he curses Canaan. And why does he curse Canaan? He says, Vayomer Arur Canaan, Eved Avadim Yelechav. He says, cursed be Canaan, the slave to slaves he will be to his brother. So the question is, why is Canaan the one being cursed? Why is Canaan the one being cursed? So Rashi, we'll look at the Rashi, then I'll read the Midrash. But the Rashi tells us as follows. Ata garamtoli shelo olid ben revi'i achar l'sham sheni. You caused me that I won't be able to have a fourth son to serve me. Means that you Cham, you removed my ability to have another child. Why did he do this? Why did Cham do this? Rashi tells us because Cham was worried he was going to have to split the inheritance of the world with a fourth brother. So he said, I don't want to have to split it, so therefore I'm not going to allow my father to have a fourth brother. He said, Cain killed Hevel because he didn't want to split the world. He didn't want to share the inheritance with one brother. I don't want to share with a fourth. So therefore he castrated his father. The the Talmud, basically it shows that why did Noach want to have a child? To serve him. The Talmud in today's Daf Yomi says that it's acceptable that parents will sometimes refer to their child as their slave, that the child's job was basically to do labor and service in the household. So he says, well, because you wanted to prevent me from having a fourth child who would serve me, therefore I'm going to make it so that your fourth child will be a slave to other people. The Torah Tamima cites a medrash that says as follows. It's a very, very difficult midrash, but the midrash says, Kishabo b'nei Africa adunim Yisrael. When the Africans came, this is from the Talmud and Tractate Sanhedrin 91a. When the Africans came to make a litigation against the Jewish people, they said, Eretz Canaan Shalanuhi. They said, really, the land of Canaan is ours. As it states, the border in Parshas Masai, it says the border of Canaan for all of its borders, Ukanan Avuanhu. And Canaan is our father. So Gavia ben Pasisa responded, you might think you're in Canaan, but really, Arur Canaan, cursed be Canaan, Eved Avadim Yelechav. Canaan will be a slave to his brother. So you're from Canaan, but you're our slaves. And we have a concept that Eved Shekana Nechasav, Eved Lami Nechasam Lami. Since you have acquired assets, but you're our slave, therefore we own you. And so therefore we're able to get the land of Canaan. So this is their response, which in the Talmud was very clever, but left us with a legacy that's very, very, very problematic. The legacy is that, according to this Talmudic text, seems to look at the people of Africa as in some way being the descendants of Canaan, and thereby justifying their enslavement. And this has led to charges of racism and really terrible things. And in fact, in the pre-Civil War, there were many preachers in America who were citing the Bible and even sometimes the Talmud as proof that it was acceptable to enslave the blacks, which is obviously was one of the most repugnant things in human history. But even in England, which is very civilized, we looked this up last night, they just canceled slavery just a few years before America. But I wanted to read a passage from the Emes Yaakov of Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky. Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky's discussion of this. And Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky was one of the great Gedolim in America in the post-Holocaust. And this is what he writes. And then we'll look at the Midrash, which also has a discussion. Why was Canaan punished? Why was he the one cursed if he himself didn't necessarily do anything? How does the Midrash deal with that? But first, let's look at what Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, how he addresses this question. So first of all, he's cognizant of the fact that people look at this passage about the enslavement of Canaan and they accuse the Jews of being racist. He says, Hine yeshnan misonenu me'umot ha'olam. He says, there are some of our enemies from the nations of the world, hatoanim, who make the claim that the Jewish people are a racist nation. He says, this is what Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky says, there are some who make the claim that Jewish people are a racist nation. Sharia Torah Omeret, and this is the basis for it, this difficult passage. The Torah tells us, Shekenan Aror hu yeh, Shekenan Aror hu yeh Eved Avadim Lechav. They said that Canaan is it says in the verse that Canaan is cursed, and he will be a slave to his brother. So says Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, Hare sheshpila Torah geza Canaan madrigas eved. The Torah has lowered the trunk of Canaan to the level of a slave. So therefore, it's racist that you should be a slave to us and all the descendants of Canaan. Clearly, this is a problem, especially since the Gemara in Sanhedrin says that the Africans are the descendants of Canaan. So therefore, he writes, this is what Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, again, probably one of the 5 leading rabbis in America after the Holocaust. He writes, Avala MS, but the truth, Vadahi Lokain, is certainly not the case. It's interesting. I wonder if we would see such a powerful rebuttal of racism from the current Rosh Yeshiva. Current Rosh, whether they would feel that it's their responsibility as a great rabbi. Oh, hold on 1 second. Just give me 1 second. Hold on 1 second. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. Okay. Everybody with me? Nod your heads? Okay, good. Okay, so it says, I was wondering if the current heads of the yeshivas in America would feel the need to denounce racism like Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky did. And it's a different world today. Okay, so he says that it's certainly the case that the whole essence of the Torah, every part, fiber of the Torah is against racism. He said, I already proved this when I discussed Genesis chapter 1, verse 22, where it states there, chapter 20, verse 22, where it says there the following. It says in the Mishnah, why was man created as one person? Nema nivra adam yechidi. Why was man created by himself? It wasn't created Adam and Eve together. Why was Adam created by himself? Like most of the other creatures were not created just the male. The other creatures were not created just the male, and then the female was grafted from the male. It was the male and the female created together. So how come man was created by himself? So the answer is, says Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, so that a person should not say to his friend, my father is greater than your father. So therefore, for this reason, God specifically changed the way human beings were created from the other creatures to say we all came from one single person, not even from two. Because if there were two, then somebody might say, I'm a descendant of that one and you're a descendant of that one. I'm greater than you. So we all come from the same person. We're all siblings. And so therefore, we would not come to this disgusting attribute of saying that one of us is better than the other one. So according to this, we need to explain, why did Noach limit or diminish Canaan to this level of perpetual servitude and lowered him below every other person? This seems to be a pure racist idea that one person is one family or one line is destined to be slaves forever. So what's the logic there? Yes, Sheldon. So Yaakov Kamenetsky says we need to explain why Noach says that they're going to be slaves forever. This seems to be at first glance a pure racist ideology. So he says, no. He says, I reject that. Right? Rav Yaakov, there's no relationship whatsoever with racism. And what is racism? The gizanus pirusha shegeze echad misnaseh me'al geze acher. What is racism? That one nation is exalted over another nation begal motza'o v'yichuso, because of his origins or his lineage, as though he is created as though he's created from a better matter, or and something that's better or more elevated. That's what racism is, because who I am at birth, I'm better than you. But here, the reason for the distinction between them, the reason why Noach drew this distinction between Shem, Cham, and Yafet, and cursed Cham's descendant, Mishum Midosav, this is the key phrase, Hayam Mishum Midosav, Hamushchasos, Shel Cham Ubeno Kanan, was because of the disgusting manner in which Cham and his son Canaan acted. That's why Noach cursed them. And that's why they're supposed to be slaves, because of the disgusting way they act. Umidos elu hinchiohu evanav acharav. And these attributes, or these character traits, is what Cham gave to his son Canaan, and what Canaan passed on. And he cites the Talmud in Pesachim 113b, Chamisha Devarim Tziva Canaan Espanav. There are 5 things that Canaan commanded his children. Canaan commanded his children 5 things. 1, love robbery. 2, love immoral sexual relations. 3, hate your masters. And 4, don't speak the truth. And once Noach saw these attributes coming from the family of Canaan, he cursed them, that they should remain slaves. And that, what does it mean when he says that they shall be avadim? What's the definition of a slave? The definition is somebody who's not allowed to marry into the Jewish people. He says, we don't want these types of people who love to steal, don't speak the truth, hate Adonechem, hate the people who are trying to run the world, love sexual immorality. We don't want these people to marry into the Jewish people. And so that's the reason why Noach was cursing them. Not because of a racist point that you'll always be inferior, but he says, if you are continuing to act like Canaan and do what Canaan taught you, which was this disgusting, offensive way, which is the opposite of the Torah, dishonest, false, immoral. That's where Rav Yaakov is going at, but he has more. But we'll stop for a second because I see Brewster. So Rav Yaakov continues. He says, we have a similar question now, which we just read. We just had this passage every single day, 3 times a day during the holiday of Sukkot. It says, so too that which it states, you chose us amongst all the nations. Those who hate Israel, those who hate the Jewish people, make the claim that we're acting as though we're better. We have better genes than the other nations of the world. And he says this can't be the case. It can't be. They claim that it's because the Jewish people are racist, and this proves it. But he says it's impossible. We can't. We abhor racism. So if that's the case, we say that because What's the reason why God has selected us? This is what Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky writes. Ela sha'anu omrim, we say that since we have inherited the proper guide to behavior from our patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and we stood at Mount Sinai and we received the Torah from Moses. Therefore, as a result of this, we have the blueprint for the best way to live our lives in accordance with the will of God. And if we do that, that is what will make us better human beings. Because if we'll separate ourselves to our good acts, we will come closer to God. But it's not. This is what Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky writes. He writes, it's not a genetic strength. We say whoever wants to convert and join us, he's able to do this. And he can also become the one you have chosen. Meaning you chose us when we act worthily, when we act in accordance with your Torah, and we act in accordance with the best of humanity. But you didn't choose us genetically. And so if somebody else who was not born from a Jew wants to act like that, you'll choose him too. And he says that there are the other racist nations don't allow anybody to convert to them and join them. He says this is the crucial distinction. For example, if somebody who was, let's say, a black man says, I want to convert to Nazism, they wouldn't let him in. So it's just the Jewish people say, of course you can come in and you can be elevated like everybody who's careful about the Torah. So that, he says, and a proof for this is that which we say, you chose us from the nations, and you say, and so too we say in the blessing of the Torah, Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Amim, he chose us from all the nations, but nevertheless, in the penitential prayers that we say on Yom Kippur, we say, Ashamnu Mikol Am. We're the most guilty of all the nations. How can we say that we're chosen and nevertheless we're the most guilty? So he says, this is what I mean. The best aspect of us is not our genetic lineage, but rather the fact that we were chosen because of our better behavior. And so now that we've sinned and we haven't guarded ourselves, so then we are the worst, because the higher a person is, then the greater the sin. And so anyway, that's Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky saying that the reason why Canaan was cursed was because Canaan was a sinful person. He was a very wicked person. He acted immorally. He was a thief. He was a liar. And so therefore, Noach did not want him to marry into the community. And that's based upon the Talmud in Pesachim 113b. But the Midrash is not satisfied. The Midrash takes other approaches. Before I go to the Midrash, I want to just point out that some want to say that actually, what was the sin? There's another reason why Canaan was cursed. That going back to the tent, hello, they read it as her tent, and say that what happened was Noach had gone into his wife's tent. He had drank the alcohol and he had gone into his wife's tent in order to produce another child. And Ham went in there and he saw the nakedness of his father. Literally probably means not that he saw his father naked, but he had intercourse with the nakedness of his father, i.e. with his father's wife, with his own mother. And that was his way of taking over the family. And then he went outside and told his brothers of this. And according to this, it would make sense why Canaan is the one who was cursed, because Canaan is the one who was born from that union of Ham and his mother. And that would make sense why he would be considered like a slave, because he would be considered the child of such a union of a father, of a mother and her son. The offspring of that union is called a mamzer, and is somebody who's not able to marry into the community. So that's Another beautiful explanation that's out there, but that's a closer reading of the text. But we'll go to the Midrash to see the Midrash's explanations of this passage. Says the Midrash, hold on. The Midrash asks this question. Vayomer Aror Kanan Eved Avadim Yelechav. So he says, so Noach says, cursed is Canaan, a slave of slaves shall he be to his brothers. Gemara asked the question, Cham chata uKanan miskalkel? Cham sinned, and Canaan is the one who is cursed? Doesn't make sense. So explains the Midrash. Rabbah is going to give several answers to this question. First answer comes from Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Nechemia. Rabbi Yehuda says, Lafisha Kosov. So what's the reason? It's a technical answer. Why didn't Noach curse Cham? If Cham is one who sinned, why did he curse Canaan and not Cham? First answer is a technical answer. Rabbi Yehuda says, Lafisha Kosov, because it says God blessed Noach and his sons, and that includes Cham. So if he's already promised to bless Cham, if it already says that God blessed Noah and his sons, how can Noach, and this goes back to Bruce's question, how can Noach come along and curse what God blessed? B'makom bracha. A curse cannot exist in a place of blessing, meaning to say he had no ability to curse Cham because God had already blessed Cham. So therefore he has no choice but to curse Canaan. But we have a problem. Why did he curse? Why did he curse Canaan? He should have cursed the oldest of the sons. Why, according to Rabbi Yehuda, is Noach cursing the youngest of his sons? So this is admittedly a weak point here, and we have to say that that Canaan had his own negative qualities. That's what the commentaries explain. That he had the negative qualities. There's another explanation. It goes back to what Bruce was saying, that how did God curse? I mean, Noah cursed. Why does it take effect? It only takes effect if God curses. So here's an answer from the author of Slobodka, Reb Nosson Tzvi Finkel. He says that the verse's simple meaning is that he cursed Cham by cursing his son Canaan. But he says, but that's the author of Slobodka rejects that, because no father would ever curse his own son. So rather what it means is that Cham's curse was self-inflicted. The harm he suffered was directly the result of his own actions. By seeing what he saw and doing what he did, Cham destroyed the essence of his being, and he became another person. So Noach, this goes back to what Sheldon was saying, Noach did not impose a curse upon Cham. He really just identified him as somebody who was a degenerate, as a person who had a curse already blossoming within his own soul. And so therefore, by saying Cham was a slave, Noach's intent was basically saying, you know who you're just a slave. He's basically not to say that you're going to be a slave forever, but he's naming the type of behavior that Ham's son was acting with. And so therefore, this goes to what Bruce was saying before. How can Noach curse Canaan? So he said Noach could not have specifically cursed Ham because that would be a contradiction to God. And so therefore, because God blessed Ham, so therefore instead Noah names Ham's offspring in the curse to teach us that spiritual debasement is not limited to one generation, but afflicts their descendants as well. And when Noach said Arur Canaan, it was really a reference. This is another explanation. When he says cursed is Canaan, it was a reference to all of the children of Ham. He's saying even your youngest son will be cursed. Meaning to say, because of the way you act. When you sin in this manner, it fundamentally alters your characteristics, and this can last for many generations if you do not change your ways. So all of this is really going to some of the questions that were raised by Bruce and by Sheldon. Okay. Okay, so then back to the Midrash itself. The Midrash says another explanation. Rabbi Nechemiah, and this is what Rashi cited. Rabbi Nechemiah says, Canaan Rav Higid Lecham. It's because Canaan saw it, and he was the initial snitch. He's the one who saw what happened to his father. And so therefore, as a result of this, Noach cursed the corrupt one. But comes along the rabbis and they teach us more. Amar Rabbi Barachia. Rabbi Barachia said, Harbe tsar nitzar Noach b'teva. Noach suffered a lot of distress in the ark. Shelo hayalo ben katan sheisham shenu. He didn't have a young son to serve him. He said, when I leave the ark, I'll get for me a younger son to serve me. But then when Ham did this act of castrating him, Noach said to him, you prevented me from having another son to serve me. Therefore, your offspring shall be a slave to his brothers who are now servants unto me. Meaning to say, your brothers now have to take care of me. So your son has to take care of your brothers. That's why Canaan was punished. Another explanation, and this is the one that's incredibly controversial, very controversial. He says, Rabbi Huna, in the name of Rabbi Yosef, says, you prevented me from doing something which is done in darkness. Meaning to say, because you castrated me, I am not able to be with my wife. Therefore, you shall be Ka'ur Mefucham, ugly and swarthy. Some read this as a reference. Basically, you're going to be looking in a very distasteful manner. And Amar Rabbi, another explanation. Cham v'kelev shimshu b'teva, because Cham and the dog both engaged in sexual relations in the act. L'fikach yotzacha mefucham v'kelev meforsam mitesh musho. So therefore, Cham emerged looking mefucham, which is swarthy, and the dog has always was decreed that for perpetuity, its sexual act would be publicized. And in their sexual act is done in what's assumed to be a degrading manner. So Amar Rabbi Levi, le'echad shekava monitin shel betoch alo shel melech. He said this is analogous to one who minted his own coin in the house of the king, meaning to say, a person goes into the king's palace and makes the coin in his own image and not the king's. So the king says, King said, I decree that this man's face shall be blackened. And also his coin will be disqualified. So therefore, Cham came out with his face darkened. But the problem is, and so therefore we want to say that this is, so some wanted to argue through the years in the pre-Civil War that this would be a support for slavery, but it's obviously such a simplistic and incorrect reading, not the least of which is the fact that the one who is associated with Africa is Cush and not Canaan, and Canaan was already born at this point. So if the punishment happened to the future generations, but anyway, it's the basic reason why we know that such an idea is false is like Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky explained, such an idea is antithetical to the very essence of the Torah, and the very essence of the Torah stands completely against racism. Let me see if there are questions here. Yeah, I see the question. Hold on.